Hello and welcome to another video on a series of video tutorials covering different topics related to Mule 4 ESB. In this video tutorial, I'm going to cover scatter gather router component, and we will see that how we can achieve parallel processing in Mule 4 using this scatter gather component. In this slide, you can see the details that are going to be covered in this video tutorial. First of all, we will have a theoretical high-level explanation of scatter gather component, where I will explain the basics and the basic usage of this router component. And then we will talk about a simple use case, and we will be having a demonstration and implementation of a simple use case using this scatter gather router component. In this use case, we will be having multiple mule flows, and we will see that how we can execute them concurrently in parallel. And we will also see that how we can flatten or how we can aggregate the results from these different scattered routes using the flatten function. So let's have a basic high level explanation of scatter gather. And if we see scatter gather, this router component is available in your core module. And what it does is that it provides you options to execute multiple routes concurrently. In a typical scenario, when we are having multiple processors in our message flow, what happens is that they get executed sequentially. For example, if you have 10 different processors and you are in your message flow, and you are executing them in a sequential manner, then what happens is that we have one thread which is executing all these processors. So overall, the time that it's going to take to complete the execution of all the processors within your message flow will be the sum of the time taken by all of these message processors. So in a normal scenario where we don't have a requirement to have any parallel processing, this might make sense and we can go ahead with this. But there can be situations where we don't need to have this type of sequential manner of execution. Rather, we want certain parallel processing so that we achieve a higher throughput, and overall time that it takes for our message flows to get executed it can be reduced significantly. So for this type of situation, we go with this scatter gather, and it allows us to have a parallel processing in a way that we can have certain number of processors which are going to be executed at the same time. So in that way, we are reducing the overall time that it's going to take to complete the processing. For example, you might have multiple message flows which are in such a nature that they are not interdependent, and you can go ahead by getting them processed in parallel fashion. And once you have executed them parallelly, then what you want is that you want to gather or you want to aggregate the results that are obtained from all of these different message flows. So this is one of the example case where you will go with the scatter gather router component, and you will increase overall performance of your integration processes. So in this case, what happens is that we have multiple threads which are going to execute these different routes, and then we will see that same mule event will be getting propagated through a reference to each of these routes. So basically, all of the routes will have same mule event, and they will be processing or they will be doing actions on the same set of events. And then once we have the outcome from all of these routers, then we will be able that will be also in the form of mule event, and we will be able to apply different data weave function, for example flatten function, to get all of these scattered outputs and gather them and flatten them to our required format. I'm not explaining much in nitty-gritties and details. Rather, it will be helpful for you to go through the documentation officially on the MuleSoft if you just want to dig more into how scatter gather works. But in this tutorial, I will be going with the demonstration, and in this tutorial, we will see that exactly how scatter gather behaves in action. So we will be implementing a use case where we will see that how we can achieve all this that has been explained theoretically. I have already created a new project in Anypoint Studio with the name Scatter Gather tutorial, and this is where we are going to implement our use case. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a new flow where we will have HTTP listener, which will be the source. So let me go to HTTP and drag a HTTP listener, and we created a flow. Let's rename the flow as main flow. I will name it as main flow. Okay, so in the main flow, let's first configure our listener. We will just go ahead with the default port 8081 and the default host. Just in case if in your machine 8081 is in use by some other process or some other application, in that case only you will have to change it. Otherwise, for this simple demonstration, let's just go ahead with the same port. In the real scenarios, you will be having your configurations in configuration properties, YAML files or properties file. I have already explained that in another tutorial. Link of that tutorial I'll put in the suggestion box, just in case if you want to understand how you can put all of these configurations into the properties file instead of hard coding them directly over here. But let's go with the simple approach here and just keep it as is. And in the path, I'm going to write slash scatter gather. So this will be the path for our service. And once we have this, now I will go to the core, and here you will see that we have scatter gather. Let's search it. So you can see we have scatter gather router component. So I will just drag and drop it over here. If you just put your arrow on top of any of these processors or components, you can read some basic information about them from here as well, which is provided by MuleSoft. For example, here you can see it says sends the same message to multiple message processors or outbound endpoints in parallel. All right. So once we have added this scatter gather, now what we are going to do that we are going to call multiple flows using the flow reference. So let's add flow references. We haven't created those flows, but first we will add the reference, then we will come back and update it. So I will add first flow reference, and I will add another flow reference. So basically in our case, we will have two parallel threads running, which means we will have two flows that will be scattered using the scatter gather, and then we will be achieving the response from these two scattered flows, and the mule event that will be passed back from this to the main flow, that is the one that we will be flattening, and we will be aggregating the results. So now we have added the references, but we haven't created these flows. So let's add flows. You can create flows or you can create subflows, but let's create the flows. And you will have to select a flow and just drag and drop it underneath. So we have created a flow. Let's name it as first, okay, child flow. Let's name it as child flow 1. And then we will add another flow just underneath, and we will name it as child second child flow or child flow 2. Okay, so we have now two flows that are child flows, and we have a parent flow. So from the parent flows, we have flow reference. So here we are going to now update the reference. So this one will be referencing to the child flow 1. Let's change the display name also to the same. And the second one, we are going to select child flow 2, and we will copy this and put the display name also exactly same. So in this way, now we have scatter gather with two references to the child flows. Okay, now we will go to the child flows and do some implementation. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to read some specific files which I have already created. I have two files. One is it.json and another one is hr.json. So we will have two JSON files that we will be reading, and whatever we will read from these two files, that one we will be aggregating together in the main flow. So if you see the content of these two files, this is hr.json file, which contains two records, two JSON elements for two different users. The first one, and all of them are containing first name, middle name, last name, department, country, city, and role. For example, this one first name is Sachin, then Kumar and Sharma as the middle and last name, department is HR, country is India, and city is Hyderabad, and the role is HR business partner. And then we have Muhammad Ali Shah, another one in Canada with this with the city specified as Toronto. These are just the sample examples. And then we have it.json where we have first name Ajmal, middle name Hussein, last name Abbasi, and department is IT, and country is Pakistan, city is Islamabad. And then we have another one with Mary Joseph. So these are just some sample examples that I have put into these two files. So what we will be doing is that in one of the flow, we will be reading from the it.json, and in another flow, we will be reading from hr.json. And once we will read it, then we will pass this payload back to the main flow, and we will be aggregating that in the main flow. So in the first flow, I need to read it. So, but in order to read it, I will have to use read file. So this read file is available in the file module. If you haven't added the file module, that needs to be added. And then we will just drag and drop this read processor into our first flow. Here I'm going to provide the path c colon slash test slash this one will be it.json. Okay, so this one will be reading the file it.json, and the second flow will be reading the file with the name hr.json. C colon slash test slash hr.json. Okay, so sorry, I put okay, yeah, first one is it and second one is hr. So let's rename it to read hr file, and this one to read it file. Okay, so this I'm taking a very simple scenario, and after this we will have transform. It's already in my favorite, so I will just add transform message. And in the transform message, I'm not going to do anything fancy. I'm just putting payload. It's not needed if you're not doing anything, any modification, but just for the sake of having it, I'm adding it into both of these child flows. Here also I'm adding payload, and it will be passed as Java. So in both cases, even if you don't add it, it doesn't make a difference, but just keep it. And now what we are going to do is that in the main flow, we are going to use a transformer after this. And in this transformer, we are going to change it to JSON. And here we are going to use flatten function. So we will use flatten payload dot payload. So in this way, using this flatten function, which is a data weave function, we are going to aggregate the results, and result that will be received by the client will be in the JSON format containing the payload from both of these aggregated routes. So let's now try to run it. And before I run it, I want to add a logger just before this transform message to show you that how exactly these two events are before applying the flatten function. So here I'm just going to add payload. So the payload that will be returned from these two child flows, we will be logging it using this logger, and after that in the transform we will be transforming it using the flatten function. Okay, so that's it for this very basic implementation. Now we are going to test it and see it how it's going to aggregate the results. So I'll just right click and run this. It will take some time to get loaded into the embedded Mule runtime, and once it's loaded and deployed, then we will hit it from the client, which can be Postman, which can be Advanced REST client, or even from your browser. So we can see that the project has been deployed in Mule runtime. Now we can go to any of the client and try to hit the service. So the listener, you can see the URL that we have to hit is localhost colon 8081 slash scatter gather. So I will go to the Postman, and here I will provide the URL http colon double slash localhost colon 8081 slash scatter gather. Okay, now if I hit this, the expectation that I have is that I should be getting a response which is containing the JSON from both of the files. So if you see here, we have this from the first IT file with department IT, and both of the records from IT, and then we have both records from the HR file, which means that we have received the response from both the scattered routes, and then we have gathered them collectively using the flatten function. If you go here in the console and see the logs, let me expand it. You can see that we received here both of the events 0. 0 is from the first route, which contains the content from the IT file, and then we have 1. This one contains the information from the second file or the second route, which is reading the HR file. If you want to just verify this and do a little more, what we can do in the logger, instead of logging both, let's log only the first one. So like this payload, and then if you specify 0, now if we save it, then it will be reloaded, and once it is reloaded, we will try to hit again, and we will see that only the first only the payload or the event from the first route will be logged here because we specified 0. Let me clear the logs and try to hit again. Okay, so here we will receive the full response because we are flattening the response completely. But if you see the logs, you will see only the first event getting logged. So here, if you see here, we can see that it is logging the results from the first file only. So you can see it is only from the IT file, not from the second file. You can see both only two objects which were from the first file. Okay, and if we just change it to 1, then we will see that it will be logging the results from the second route. Let's put 1, and now if we get it loaded again by saving it, let me just clear the logs. Okay, now I'm going to hit it again. Here we will get the full response, but here in the logs we can see that now it's Sachin Kumar Sharma, and the second record from the file Muhammad Ali Shah. So basically it is logging only the second the result from the second route. So this is how we achieve parallel processing using scatter gather, and this is very powerful and a useful processor or a component, and it helps us a lot in our real scenarios where we want to achieve a better efficiency and throughput using the parallel processing. Here if you just click here, we have certain configuration, max concurrency, target, timeout, and we can specify what concurrent, how much concurrent processors maximum we want to allow. If you don't specify, it will take based on the number of different scattered routes that you have. In our case we have total 2 routes, so it will take 2 only. So basically it will be processing 2 threads, 2 routes in parallel using 2 threads. Okay, so if you are not right now, if you see, we are not having any error handling. So in this case, if any of the route fails, let's do that what happens if one of the route fails. So here I'm going to put a wrong name, so it, and I will put so its.json. This file basically does not exist. So we want to see that if we are using scatter gather and one of the route fails and we don't have error handling implemented, what will happen. Let me clear it and let me try to run it, and you can see we got the exception, and it specifies 0 because it has got the exception in the first one because file c test its.json does not exist, but it did not give us any result for the second route as well because we did not have error handling, and it will give you results only if both of them are successful. So now if I just correct it and put it it.json, but I change the second one and make this one incorrect. Let me put shrs.json here and save it. It will get loaded, and then we will see that how it behaves now. You will see that the second one, because of the second one, we will not get any response. Okay, so if you see here, oh, I didn't change both, so now C test its.json and hrs.json. Both don't exist. So we see the error from both. Let me see the first one. Okay, because I did not remove this one. So if I save it after changing it, so now it should give me response with having the error for the second one only, because the first one is correct one, but we will not get the flattened or aggregated response data. So here we can see that it is not giving us the exact response, and we are getting 500 internal server error because of second one. Of course, if you implement error handling, then you can fix this issue, but error handling is not in the scope of this particular video tutorial. I will have another tutorial where I will explain how you can use error handling at the scope level as well as at the global level, and there we will be covering this in detail. That's it from this video, and I hope that the information that has been conveyed to you through this video tutorial will be helpful for you. And the basic and a very simple use case that I implemented will not be a real-time use case, but based on the information that you achieved and the knowledge that you gained from this tutorial, you can extend this and you can go with the more advanced and more practical type of use case, and sky is the limit. You can expand and you can go through the content, the understanding of these topics as much as you can, and more practice will give you more insight into the nitty gritties of these different components, including the scatter gather. And if you want more knowledge, you can always refer to the official MuleSoft documentation, which is quite handy and quite powerful, which has a lot of topics, a lot of use cases explained. But at the same time, if you want to go through some different topics for the beginners as well as intermediate levels and some of them of advanced level, you can refer to this playlist on MuleSoft tutorials on my Tutorialspedia YouTube channel, and this will help you a lot to understand and grasp the concepts. And don't forget to press the bell icon and subscribe to the channel so that you get notified for any new videos that are uploaded. That's it from this video. I will be back with some more videos soon, so stay tuned. Thank you very much.